If you're playing a hunter in Classic, you've probably at least heard of the Dire Maul Tribute solo run. In this video, I'm going to cover how to execute this farm at a basic level in case there's anyone out there that wants to learn this but hasn't given it a shot yet. Hopefully, this quick guide gives you the info you need to tackle this extremely lucrative solo farm for yourself. Let's get into it. So this hunter is my alt. I first started soloing tribute runs the day I hit 60 with it, and it took me about a dozen attempts to get to the king for the first time. In my opinion, getting to that boss fight is by far the hardest part of this run. The boss itself is pretty deterministic, so long as you're not unlucky with feign death being resisted. And even when that does happen, and it will, you've got ways to recover from it. Well, most of the time. Anyway, on to the setup. You are going to need invisibility potions. This run can be done with lesser invis pots, but on my server, graders are actually cheaper most of the time. And the extra couple seconds of invisibility makes the stretch you use them in much, much easier. As long as the price difference isn't massive, don't hurt yourself trying to use lesser invis. Life's too short. Large Sephorium charge or a true silver skeleton key. You absolutely must be either a blacksmith or an engineer for this farm. Personally, I'd recommend engineering since it's the best profession in the game, but do what you feel is best. You'll also need a pet that knows dash, and preferably is level 60. I've done this with a level 58 pet, but anything you can do to make sure you have a bit of wiggle room on the king fight for the pet taking a hit or two is a good idea. Optionally, a cat with prowl can save you a bit of time in one specific place, but I haven't had time to level Broken Tooth past 50 yet, so I get by with my trusty pig, Francis. Water and pet food. You're going to need to drink from time to time, and it's unavoidable that your pet will sometimes die. You don't want your furry friend to abandon you, so bring some snacks. Mage water is obviously your best bet here, but anything that's as good or better than Morning Glory Dew will be fine. Arrows. Lots and lots of arrows. Level 40 vendor arrows are fine, ice threaded are better, and thorium headed are obviously best. Of course, these more expensive arrows do eat some of your profits, but it's not a massive loss since you want good ammo for raiding in PvP anyway. Enchanting. Now this is optional, but does improve your gold per hour a bit because you can disenchant greens and blues that would vendor for less than they'd disenchant for. This will depend on the economy of your server. Personally, I don't have enchanting, and I still make plenty of cash doing these runs. Alright, enough talk, let's get into the run itself. So I start here with Aspect of the Cheetah up and my pet dismissed. You're going to run straight at the ogre at the corner and scattershot him before hopping up onto the ledge to the left of the ramp. Some people wait for this guy to pad away, but I like to live dangerously. Run along the ledge and wait until you drop combat before hopping down and summoning your pet. Tell your pet to stay, make sure it's on passive, and that none of its abilities are on autocast. Drop a frost trap, and send your pet at the nearest mob in the archway, activating dash just before it gets there. Once the mob's aggro, put your pet back on passive and it'll return to its starting position. This is the basic mechanic of the entire run. Pet aggroes mobs and dashes away, you run past and feign. Something to mention here, you always want to wait until all of the mobs in the group have aggroed your pet before you actually move forward yourself. If you don't, they might decide to hit you, and that's going to be tough to recover from. Head up the ramp to the gazebo, hugging the left ledge, run behind the pillar, and feign. Line of sight may or may not affect feign death resists, but it doesn't cost you anything to do it this way, and it makes me feel a little safer. If the dog's on the right aggro, scattershot the nearest one and just keep going. You'll be able to stay ahead of them long enough to feign in the safe spot. Grab the key from Fengus's chest and move on. So here, because my pet is dead and scattershot is available, I run right at this guy and scatter him before they debugging him on the ledge while I resurrect Francis. If scattershot isn't up, you can get past him by going all the way to the right, then cutting the corner of the ramp with a jump. You might get hit once, but you won't die here. Keep an eye on all the trolls in Fengus, use the key from the chest to open the door, and head inside. From here on out, there's a series of pet pulls and feigns to manage, as well as some wandering eyes of Kilrog you need to look out for. I have a macro that targets and marks eyes that I use to make sure I have an idea of where they are. If you let an eye see you and summon Voidwalkers, you'll almost certainly have to reset the run, so make sure that doesn't happen. Arcane Shot plus Auto Shot should kill them, or an aim shot if you have time to line it up. The second group, you're going to do a slight variation on the pet pull where you aggro them, then send your pet after the previous group that you've already bypassed. If you hustle and don't get crippled by a Doomguard pet, you can get down into the arch and your pet should despawn before it dies. Next, do the same thing with these bugs. Make sure they're all on your pet before you move up. These bugs and the previous group are where you can use a Prowling Cat to save 30 seconds or so on the run by prowling past the ogres, aggroing the bugs, and running your pet back at the very first group. As you're running through the bug area, keep an eye on Slipkick. You need to keep some distance from him. I cut it pretty close here. Stand up from your Feign Death when he's in the corner and move to the far corner of the wall. As soon as he turns to walk parallel to the wall, shimmy back to the other side so you don't aggro as you pass away. Somewhere in the middle of all this, you're also going to have to kill an eye as well. The two Maulers that are next are another slightly tricky pull. What I do is target the furthest one and scattershot the near one using a mouse over macro as soon as I clear the edge of the wall. Then strafe to my left, spamming Concussive Shot. Feign Death out of sight of the group in the corner, and wait for the guard to be out of the way. Now without standing up first, use your Invis Pod. You don't have much time, especially if you opted for lesser invisibility potions, so hustle up the ramp, through these other mobs, and up to the next ramp where you can safely resummon and heal up your pet. Tell your pet to stay on the landing, drop a Frost Trap on the ramp ahead of you, and pet pull the Maulers at the door. You'll see here that I very nearly die at this point. My pet despawned from distance before the mobs hit my Frost Trap, so they turned on me before I could get the door open. This has never happened to me before, but if it does happen to you, swap to Aspect of the Monkey after the door opens, pop Deterrence if you have it, and try to get to a safe distance before you feign. I used my Gnomish cloaking device because I wasn't totally sure I was safe, but honestly I'm not sure it would have helped if I had been close enough to aggro these dudes. Alright, we're in the home stretch now with just 3 more pet pulls and some dogs to deal with. Park your pet at the corner of the hallway and pull the group ahead of you. Run to the corner before the guard and feign. Once your pet is healed up and Feign is cooled down, pull the guard and send your pet back at the other group. This pull has a pretty high mortality rate for your pet, as it's hard to get the distance you need for it to despawn before Crom Crush Mortal strikes its face off. For the final trash pull, send your pet at the nearest to this group, and then back down the hallway at the pack before Crom Crush. Avoid the dogs on the right, and feign as soon as you're safe. Heal up the pet, drink, and get ready to kill the dog patrol. Quick note on these dogs. You don't absolutely have to kill them, but until you have gear good enough to make the king kill faster, you probably should. It slows down your run a bit, especially if you have to end up waiting for them to patrol around because you were slowed down a bit in the hallway. Done perfectly though, you can get into position on the outer ledge before pulling them, which makes this much easier. Anyway, we pull the dogs and do hunter things until they're dead. Make sure your pet is in combat with them, so if you have to feign death, they don't drop aggro and waste a bunch more of your time. Keep Cheetah up, use Concussive Shot and Scatter Shot to keep distance, and let Auto Shots, Serpent Sting, and the occasional multi-shot grind these mutts down. This example isn't the greatest, since because I got a little screwed up after blowing the door, they were nearer the end of the patrol than I would have liked. I end up sacrificing poor Francis and slowly running these dogs around until they're dead. Okay, here we are at the king, the big cheese, the head honcho, Ogress Rex. What we're going to do here is set up our pet so it's in a safe spot while we bounce the king and his hench ogre Cho Rush back and forth like loot-filled ping-pong balls between us and our fuzzy friend. Tell your pet to stay in the corner here so it's out of line of sight from the ledge, then send it after Cho Rush. I activate dash just as Francis gets to the flat area near the boss, and as soon as Cho turns to attack, I recall him to the safe spot and get into position. The rest of the fight is just managing the position of the king and Cho relative to you and your pet. The only variation here is what class Cho Rush spawns as, priest, shaman, or mage. For the priest Cho Rush, which is what we have here, you need to make absolutely sure he doesn't get into melee with your pet. He can fear, and if he does, your pet's going to end up out of position and force you to reset because he's in line of sight to be charged by the king. I have recovered from this once by using Eyes of the Beast to reposition him quickly and then telling him to stay as soon as I cancel it, but it's tough to do. Second, you need to keep Viper Sting up on Cho as much as possible. Priests heal and shield, and Cho is no slouch in that department, so drain his mana and make sure he can't do it. The Shaman is pretty much the same as the Priest, but doesn't have the fear that can wreck your attempt. Instead of casting shields on himself and the King, Shaman Cho likes to drop Earthbind totems that do literally nothing in the fight except making him easier to mana drain. Viper Sting him to 0 mana to minimize the number of heals he can cast, and that's the ballgame. Finally, the Mage. This is probably the easiest possible Cho bro, but does deal the most damage, so be really careful about line of sighting fireballs and keeping them off your pet. Viper stinging the Mage isn't strictly speaking necessary, but it doesn't hurt. All the variations of Cho have a ranged spell attack that you can use the pillars around the platform to line of sight. You can manipulate Cho's position a little bit by aggroing him with an auto shot, waiting for a cast to start, then jumping behind a pillar. Same deal out in the flat section of the central platform. If they have mana to cast, and you need a bit more time for Feign Death to cool down, get Cho to start a cast at you and then duck behind cover. Once the king is dead, most of the mobs in the instance go from hostile to unfriendly. Now, I'm not sure this matters, but I always run and talk to Crom Crush before I grab the king buff and spawn the tribute chest. I do this for two reasons. One, people have told me that talking to him improves the loot in the chest by adding another blue to the tribute. Two, in the event that I end up selling some loot out of the chest, him being out of the hallway and down in the courtyard makes it much easier to escort someone up here to loot their Treant's Bane, Tarnished Elven Ring, or Rod of the Ogre Magi. Anyway, that's it, that's all. Dire Maul Tribute done in one. You can do this in greens and dungeon blues as soon as you hit level 60 and have the key from DM East. And not only will it help you gear up if you're not raiding already, it'll make you a tidy sum of cash to boot. I personally make an average of 60 gold an hour doing this, but I'm not the fastest at it. If you can do the whole run in less than 20 minutes, you can easily get 80 to 100 gold per hour here, but that takes some gear and a lot of practice. Hopefully this helps someone. Thanks for watching, folks, and we'll see you next time.